I'm Chad Ruthermans.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And welcome to NOCLIP Pocket. Pay less, experience more. Today, we're going to be talking about Octodad, Dadliest Catch, a game that was developed and published by Young Horses and was released in 2014 on Android, iOS, Linux, Windows, Switch, OS X, PS4, PS Vita, tvOS, Wii U, and Xbox One.
But first, if you give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
And second, if somebody could explain to me what tvOS is, I would love to know.
I assume that just means it's playable on some smart TVs or something.
That could make some sense, but probably a particular brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe like a Roku game or some shit. Anyway, Octodad Dadliest Catch is a physics hell game. In which you have to navigate the world while using a physics-simulated octopus in a three-piece suit. You mentioned at the end of the last episode, when we rolled for Octodad, that Octodad seemed like the perfect pocket game that we just never got around to, essentially. Yeah. And I believe that you are correct about that. And even more so, the perfect pocket game, because it gives me an opportunity to go off on a tangent right at the beginning of the episode that's only vaguely related to Octodad. And it's something that was kind of eating at me while I was playing the game, which is why it comes up so early. And that is that Octodad is a game that came out in 2014, and like a lot of this type of game that came out in this type of era, owes a shitload to the most influential game developer of our generation, Bennett Foddy, who is the developer of, most famously now, Getting Over It. But
also QWOP.
But also QWOP, which is what would have been out at the time. That was... It's like almost like it's like synonymous with that like Flash games era where QWOP was just this hilarious game. If you haven't played QWOP, first of all, do it. Go play QWOP because it's amazing. Where you can only control each part of a runner's legs as they run down a track, and your goal is to make it to 100 meters, but most people for many hours will only make it to 2 or 3 meters before face planting into the ground. And that kind of thing became popular for a short period of time, and I feel like Octodad Dadliest Catch almost sort of picks up the tail end of it, where it's this full game release of what is essentially a joke premise. And we see this in other games, like Goat Simulator is still a thing.
That's what I was going to bring up as a comparison.
Yeah. Like, there are these games that do the physics hell thing and, you know, are reasonably successful with it, put a lot of different things in. But Octodad has always been sort of the poster child for me of, like, this is the part... Please pardon or don't the pun, where the genre sort of jumped the shark. Like, this like has a whole thing and is a game that you can buy and play with achievements and stuff to master and do. But it is the premise itself is so outlandish that it is difficult to take seriously, and it puts you into a weird headspace the whole time you're playing it, which I think all works in the game's favor, to be fair.
Yeah, like one of my first notes is this feels like a physics-based game from the era of like Goat Simulator, but like actually good,
right?
And not just a joke. Like, I mean, it is a joke largely, and has lots of like jokey elements to it. But it feels like it's an actual game, and not just like something you download and have a laugh.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like it's got like a full like campaign or whatever you want to call it, like a story to play through. Which I think is rare for this kind of game. Yeah,
it is a story with, like, plot and voice acting. And that's all very surprising, given what this game is. In fact, to start actually talking about the game, and not just the influence of QWOP on a whole generation of games in this era, I love that this game just has a fucking theme song that reinforces that the premise of this game is that Octodad is an octopus and he's trying to pass as a human being. He wants other people to not know that he is an octopus. And it's done in this like pseudo, like at this point in culture, kind of tired, like pseudo 50s era, like family man, housewife, and their two opposing genders children.
Yeah, it kind of felt almost like an adult animated sitcom show. Like it even kind of looks a little like Family Guy or something in its style. And I mean, those themselves are influenced by the same thing, like 50s sitcoms,
right?
Like tropes. So yeah, it definitely has that feel, and it has like this indie rock theme song that is just great.
Yeah, because the theme song's lyrics are like Octodad, nobody suspects a thing, and that's amazing. Like, because of obviously like the whole point of the game hinges on the idea, like your fail state in the game mechanically is tied to the idea that you cannot be found out by people.
Yeah, I think it's like an extra funny angle, at least from my perception, because like it kind of feels like he just stumbled into having to pretend to be a human. Like he just like meets this woman and ends up hitting it off with her and is like ends up marrying her and having kids. And it's unclear whether or not he wants any of that.
Right.
Like it almost kind of feels like he's keeping up the charade for Scarlett, his wife.
Yeah.
Like for her sake. And it's not necessarily that he has like any kind of goal or reason to pretend to be a human.
Yeah, Octodad is an enigma. He's unreadable, a man of mystery, a mollusk of mystery. And it is very amusing, I think, the way that this is set up. Like, it is genuinely funny in a way that on paper it doesn't really sound like it would be. Like, it sounds like a very one-note premise. Like, Octopus flops around, has a difficult time performing regular tasks, but off-screen is apparently doing a good enough job that nobody suspects a thing, as the theme song implies. But it's just executed so elegantly, I think. It's not so over the top, which sounds ridiculous because we're talking about Octodad. It's not so over the top that it becomes an unbelievable. I mean, it's an unbelievable premise. This is hard to describe.
Yeah, it is hard to describe.
Yeah, it doesn't go as far as you think it would, and in fact treats its subject matter pretty well to make it consistently funny without being tiresome.
Yeah, it's like paradoxically, I think, it's like a comedic premise, but that it's like taking seriously, if that makes sense. Like they're executing the idea very well.
Yes.
Yeah. So like it has like moments where you're like, oh, this is really ridiculous that I'm like falling all over this and doing that, and people are looking right at me and they don't know I'm an octopus, and like it hits you that that's like very funny. But a lot of the time you're kind of like focused on trying to accomplish things. So like it kind of like waves over you and gets to continue to be funny because of that.
Yeah. It is absolute ludonarrative harmony. The gameplay helps the premise work because it takes so much of your focus to maintain that it keeps coming over you in waves, like what's actually happening. I think one of the best gameplay levels in the game and one of the worst narrative levels in the game is the supermarket,
the grocery store.
Yeah, because when you're in it, it's what you imagine Octodad is. You're like, okay, so it's this very like sardonic, like people talking about the Soda City, which is some like dumb marketing thing where they've stacked all the soda cans in the shape of like a castle, and everyone in the supermarket's like, I wish I could live in Soda City. Like it's a very goofy sort of like there's a joke every second. There's a guy who talks on the loudspeaker to tell more jokes, and it gets very old comedy wise pretty quickly, though it has a lot of like the most interesting mechanical implementation. But every other level in the game is like vague enough about what it's actually telling you to do that it is still funny and still interesting the whole way. And I really appreciated that part of it. Well, let's talk about how you play the game, because I think that's obviously the thing this game is about. The fact that we even got 5 minutes on the narrative is pretty impressive. And we'll come back to it as well, because there's more to say. But I do want to play a clip that I happen to have prepared. I say that actually not having it prepared, but knowing that I'll be able to edit this later. Of a longtime friend of the podcast, Dan, saying that this game is, quote, "Oh my god, this is the hardest game ever made." When that clip was taken, he was playing this game on a controller, and I've played this game both. I've played it with a controller and I've played it with a keyboard and mouse. And I do have to say the keyboard and mouse controls are just enormously easier than the controller controls are.
You do get an achievement for playing the game with the controller, which seems to suggest that it is harder.
Yeah. And it's really just because the controller controls make you play Twister with your own hands a bit, because you have to keep swapping between like which leg and shit and moving it around and trying to, whereas like the other one you kind of press a button then you use the mouse to swing around, and that's all you really do.
That does sound way easier. Yeah. I never tried keyboard and mouse.
It's a lot simpler, and I was able to sort of speed through the game this time through. But to describe the actual gameplay of the game, to get a sense of why it is so difficult to play at times, you move around by individually lifting each of Octodad's legs.
Yeah, he's got like clusters of legs, like 2 that work as human legs, and 2 that are like arms.
Right. Yeah, and then you swap essentially between arm mode and leg mode, and you only have to ever control one arm, so the arm stuff isn't too hard. But the actual mobility is just ridiculous. And every object in the game is functionally weightless, so when you bump into it, it goes flying everywhere in a hilarious manner. And your goal is to sort of get around without knocking too many things over or causing too much of a scene.
Yeah, so it was probably something I was doing, but it always felt like either his right or his left leg, I don't remember which one, but one of the two always seemed to want to like drift to one side. And I don't know if you had that experience with playing with a controller, or if that was just me doing something weird.
I don't remember having that experience with a controller. The experience that I kept having with the just at all in this game is that it was very difficult to keep track of which button controlled which leg, because the octopus is very like springy.
Yeah,
he's a flexible dude.
Jiggly.
He's very jiggly, and so what happens is you move a leg and then he gets all wrapped up and faces the wrong direction. So it was really hard to know what exactly was going to happen when I clicked every time.
Yeah.
I don't know if that describes that.
Yeah, like, it just, like, later in the game, when I kind of was always just, like, with the controller, like, hitting the trigger and pushing forward and just kind of trying to do this.
Right.
Like, just, like, wiggle back and forth to try to get momentum, which seemed to work pretty good, unless I needed to, like, specifically maneuver. And, like, later in the game, you have to, like, go across these, like, beams above, like, the chef, like, for the final confrontation part.
Yeah.
And it's, like, doing that, there's, like, with one of his legs, I'm able to, like, mostly move it where I want. But then the other one, it's like I lift it up, and then it just kind of wants to go one way, and I have to, like, struggle to fight to, like, move it to where I want to go. And I don't know if that's an intentional game design thing.
Right.
That he's got, like, a stubborn leg that wants to go in a different direction, or if it was, like, something was fucking up.
I think because what I'm thinking of is on the ship level, which, much like the ship level in Resident Evil 7, didn't feel like it really needed to be as long as it was.
Yeah.
There's a section where you have to like tightrope walk over the all the crew while they tell jokes about being fishermen. And there's a little narrow beam, and I did find myself not being able to properly step on things, but that's two things. One, in that level the ship is constantly swaying back and forth, so there's just perpetual motion going on. And then the second thing was, I think when you lift your other leg after moving the first one, his body will swing to right itself. So probably that is what you're experiencing, is that
Maybe.
like it'll try and face forward in relation to whatever direction his foot that's planted is facing, and then will turn like a tangled yo-yo.
Right.
Until he's facing the right way, and that'll swing the other leg around. So much so that it hits the mic stand and makes a noise.
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
It could, yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it feels like I was just like not understanding like some kind of nuance to the way it controlled.
Right. Which I think is the way that the game is supposed to feel.
Yeah. Like, I can't shake that sense that like there's probably people, much like people who get really good at QWOP.
Oh, yeah.
Like, who just can, like, not effortlessly, but, you know, like, perfectly maneuver Octodad.
Right.
You know? Like, it feels like the potential is there to, like, master it, but it does seem like the average person just kind of have, like, this nebulous understanding of how it works, and you just kind of flail around.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think, because most players, the first time you play this game, the kind of thing that makes you say, this is the hardest game ever made, is the fact that controlling it is not well explained by the game, by design. Because if you knew sort of the secrets of the game, then it would lose its charm. And yeah, I just looked it up, and the speedrun world record for Octodad Dadliest Catch is 13 minutes and 8 seconds.
Wow.
So yes, there are people who are masters of controlling Octodad, which is pretty wild. Because it does seem like the kind of thing that no matter how much you practice at it, you're never gonna get there. But evidently, that is not true. I will say a tip for anybody who's playing Octodad for the first time is that Octodad's leg strength is immense.
Yeah.
So as long as you plant a foot somewhere, it's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about falling down. So you just control the other leg and try and get it up to the next place you want to go. Mm-hmm. That is probably the main key thing to making the game function. And otherwise, good luck.
Yeah, like in one of the early parts where you're like at the house and you're in the backyard, the daughter says like, "Oh, Daddy, try the new slide or whatever." Yeah. And at the beginning of the game, like I walked over to it and like tried to walk up it, and I'm like, this seems impossible. But then later, I learned how you climb like ladders and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it does kind of try to hint at it early on, but I think a lot of people would just not figure that out.
No, yeah, it'll take a while. Yeah, I think the first time that I'd learned how to really climb things was in the aquarium level.
Yeah.
Trying to go up a ladder. It's just like very difficult. And there's also a part in that stage where you have to climb up an escalator that's going down, which was my own personal hell. That was a very difficult thing to do, and it gave me arm cramps.
See, that was pretty easy for me because I think my like strategy of just flailing the sticks just worked for that.
The strategy of flailing really
comes through in that part.
Yeah, it's like the tagline of this game, more or less.
Well, sometimes it'll bite you, and sometimes that's exactly what you want to do.
That's true, yeah. Sometimes you need to be more controlled.
Yeah. So there's a mechanic in this of, I think kind of as you touched on a little earlier, of not wanting to make a scene.
Right.
So there's this mechanic of like people like looking at you. You'll get like these dotted line like eye lines that like people are watching you.
Mm-hmm.
It never seemed to matter, except for, you know, like on the boat or with the employees at the aquarium.
Yeah.
So like, and not that I think it being enforced more heavily would make the game better, because I think it would actually make the game worse, because it's very hard.
Right.
And but like it seemed weird that it was always a mechanic that was implemented in every level when it seemed to not matter.
Yeah. It's in fact the mechanic that most closely relates to the entire premise of the game.
Yeah.
But it is very rarely an issue.
Yeah, like at the grocery store, I think it really stood out because it's like the first level in public.
Right.
I'm just doing all kinds of shit right in front of like somebody, and it's just like nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I'm imagining that probably we've talked about this on several different episodes. I think at this point, like it feels like the kind of mechanic that was like ideated and then implemented. And then it was too punishing. And so they just, rather than remove it completely because it still serves a purpose, they just scaled it way back so it would never be an issue.
Yeah, it could also be the opposite thing where it wasn't a mechanic, but then people, like in play testing, were just like doing whatever. And they like wanted the player to be like in a headspace of like trying to act normal.
Right.
And then like putting the mechanic in like made people remember that that's what they're supposed to be doing.
True.
Sort of a thing.
It does make the concept, like it serves the comedy.
Yeah, it sells the premise better.
Yeah. Because when you're just running around and fucking shit up, that is a whole genre of game, as discussed.
Yes.
But the idea that you doing this, it makes you, the player, imagine being in the shoes of the witnesses and being like, if I saw somebody doing this, I probably would be pretty suspicious. And so it does serve the comedy a good bit. So that is fair.
Mm-hmm. So did you cheat at the arcade games in the aquarium?
I don't think I knew you could cheat at them.
There's a couple of them you can. Like in the basketball shooting one, you can just climb over the barrier and then just drop the basketballs in the hoop.
I didn't do the basketball one.
Okay.
I don't think.
I thought you had to do them all to get enough prizes.
I thought so as well, but I looked around and there were like 2 or 3 that I didn't finish. I think there's like 10 in the thing, and you only have to do 7.
Okay, so yeah, you can cheat at that one, and then there was also one where you just had to throw stuff to like knock over essentially like milk bottle.
Oh yeah, I did that one.
That one you can also just climb over the barrier and just knock them
all down
with your arm. Which so I cheated on both of those because I thought the throwing was like a wonky mechanic, at least with the controller.
Yeah, a lot easier on mouse keyboard.
And like when you do, like some guy like from off screen will be like, "Hey, this guy's cheating." it was Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
A classic. What's the deal?
Cheating at arcade games.
But yeah. So I thought that was funny. I like that you were able to cheat. Yeah, and it doesn't like punish you for doing so.
I agree. I think it would go very much against the spirit of this game to have like strictly enforced rules for anything really. Like if you can find a way to manage it. Like, I cheated in the kelp throwing thing because there's a part where they don't expect you. There's no way they expect you to actually do it this way. You, like, move a fan and it blows things that your kid is throwing up and you're supposed to get them into these, like, cups, like, kind of like a skee ball situation. And I found that to be functionally impossible to do.
Yeah.
So I did just pick them up off the ground and put them in the thing.
Yeah, I noticed that there was a graphic on the wall showing the kid throwing them into the thing and them flying. Yeah, but I was like, I never even began to think about trying to do it that way and just pick them up and put them in the cups.
Yeah, that's the only way to really do it, I think. Because I spent a good, like, few minutes trying to get that to work.
Oh, yeah.
Because I felt like, okay, I'm kind of getting the hang of this. I know where I need to be in order to get it to go where I want it to go. But that just was never true. It, like, no 2 throws did the same thing, no matter what I was trying to do. So I eventually just gave up on it and started putting them in there.
Yeah.
That does give rise to what I know you thought was the hardest part of the entire game.
Yeah. So there is a jungle gym at the end of the kelp educational section.
Yeah, World of Kelp.
World of Kelp, yeah. And I think it was just one of those things where I think everybody's had a moment like this in a game where I was just like, I tried it and I probably attempted it like 15 times or more and just could not get up this jungle gym. There's a part with the bouncy thing and there's a fan at the bottom and I was like, no matter what I do, I just fly off the side after, trying to get up for like fucking 5 minutes straight or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like I just quit and went to bed and then attempted it the next day and got it in like 4 tries. It's like I think I just had like some kind of mental block.
Yeah. Well, notably as discussed,
it is hard.
You were drunk the second time.
I was drunk the second time.
Yeah, and it was easier which might be just true of this game entirely. I think if you drink before playing, you'll do better.
You'll be on the same wavelength as Octodad?
Yeah. I played this when I was legally required to be sober because I was at work, and it had its moments of being just very hard that I was like, if I had less physical control over my body, this would probably go easier. But yeah, I don't know. I think the game definitely has its difficult moments, but none of them really stem from the having to stay out of line of sight of people part of the game. Though it is funny that it makes a belching sound effect when you do things badly around people. I don't really understand why it does, but there it is.
So one thing I thought was kind of funny and clever is they use like their method of gating where you can go. It's just you'll grab a doorknob and it'll just pull off the door.
Oh yeah.
I just think that's a really clever version of like an invisible wall for this game.
This door is locked from the other side.
Yeah, you just pull the doorknob off. You're like, oh, okay, I can't go in there.
Yep. Yeah, I liked a lot of the things that were just sort of like their methods of gating by and large were all diegetic. Like it's all things that exist in the game that prevent you from doing things that you would normally. Which I think reads a lot better in a game where the physics simulation is kind of the subject of the game.
I guess the only other thing that I had is also just related to music. They got a great song at the beginning, and then I also think they have a great song at the end during the final boss encounter type thing. The song that plays is like a parody of like an intense final boss song. Like the kind I'm talking about that's like like the intense choir, and like it's just like really
aggressive Latin ambiance.
Yeah, it's just a really funny parody of that type of thing. I'm not going to try and explain why. If you're curious, just look up the soundtrack and find that song. It's very funny.
I mean, my question before I say my piece, is: do you not want to spoil how good of a song parody it is, or do you just not have the words to describe what makes it so funny?
I don't think I could describe what makes it so funny beyond what I've said. So
okay, so spoilers for what makes the song funny, at least to me, is that I listened to it for like 4 straight minutes of playing the final boss
before you notice it.
Before I even recognized that like all of the chanting that was going on were all just people saying blub blub in different tones. So that was extremely good and something that I loved about it. Yeah, I agree. I also think we should address, because I also ran out of things to talk about. It's not a long game. But before closing out, I think we should address the how the plot sort of wraps up, because honestly, it was more involved than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if it needed to be, but it was.
I liked it.
Yeah, I did
actually had a plot.
Yeah. So you go through what you think the game is going to be is just sort of like the day-to-day life of Octodad as he tries to blend in with human society. But you're being pursued by your like Elmer Fudd style persistent villain.
Yeah, basically, they have a similar thing to this in The Little Mermaid. There's a chef that chases Sebastian around, and I feel like it has to be at least a little bit inspired by that.
A bit. There are a few references to things in this game, so it does make sense to me that that might be the case. Including, weirdly, like a collection of Minecraft-themed foods at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
Which felt like the most, like, overt reference to anything in the game, so it was a little odd.
Yeah, I wondered if there was some kind of connection.
Yeah, like they did
the people,
like a promotion.
Yeah, or like
Mojang.
Yeah, like the people who worked on this maybe knew the people who made Minecraft or something.
Yeah. Man, that's funny to think about. Because in 2014, knowing Notch might be a thing that you would want to do, to advertise to people.
Yeah.
And now you probably would not want to. But anyway, you're pursued by this chef character who shows up in each level to sort of like try and get you into a trap.
Yeah, he's the only person who knows you're an octopus.
Right. And he does always succeed. You are not given the option to see through the trap. You know it's coming, and you walk right into it every time by order of the game being the game, which is funny. And then at the end of the game, he successfully tricks you, takes off your suit, and throws you into a pool in the aquarium, so that you are an octopus once more. And I like this part because it does get to show you that, like, Octodad is actually competent at anything, but like it's just being an octopus. Like it's very obvious that he's forcing himself to live outside of his element. And you like swim and it plays this triumphant song as you like avoid a shark and shit and swim around in this tank. And then there's like a whole ass flashback section where you wash up on a boat and I guess get your first taste of coffee, which may be the whole incentive for him being a dad. And, you know, it shows, like, how he meets his wife, Scarlett, and how he meets the chef, who becomes obsessed with exposing him.
I guess just becomes captain of that boat.
He does just become while the other captain is in the shower.
Yeah, toweling off.
Yeah, he's toweling off. That's an inside joke, and we aren't going to explain it. And then you go back and there's this like moment of everyone discovering that you're an octopus and making their peace with it.
Yeah, I like that the family doesn't care.
Right. I think it's very important that is the case. And it's amusing and it's funny, and I'm even doubly amused by the fact that they made this game where the intent of the game is obviously just to be a difficult to control physics mayhem style experience, and it has like a 3-act structure with like a heroic downfall and re-rise to glory. And the amount of just effort that was put in is an amusing amount of effort to put into a story to a game like this. So I was a big fan. I liked that element of it.
Yeah, me too.
Do we have
flailing thoughts?
Flailing thoughts.
My flailing thoughts are, I like this game a lot, actually. I'm not a big physics hell kind of fan. I know you like QWOP, but I'm the kind of person that like tried it for 5 seconds and was like, fuck this. So yeah, and Goat Simulator is, you know, like a thing that amused me for like maybe 30 minutes.
Fair.
So yeah, like I like that this is an actual game that has a story. It has like, I think it's like, it is hard to control, but I think it feels tuned just right to where it's like feels like you can do it. You know, it isn't like so hard that you're just kind of like, all the comedy comes from trying to do it and it being too hard.
Right.
Like you're actually able to like get through it and like make progress in it. And it just manages to be funny and entertaining the whole time. Some of the writing is pretty clever. Like the story is charming. And yeah, like I'm really impressed with how like well they executed the premise. 'Cause it feels like, it could go down so many other avenues that are worse than this. So yeah, I think it's impressive that they pulled it off and that it is as much fun as it is. And yeah, I guess I can't really say it much better than that. It's funny and probably about as well done as it could have been.
Yeah. This game is not going to crack anybody's best games of all time list. But I also can't say that I don't recommend it. It is a cool, funny game. That is not, it's not inherently enjoyable in the sense of like the moment-to-moment gameplay, but it's one of those things where the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. I think that they put enough effort into this game to make every element of it succeed, and when you put it all together, it just is a very bemusing package where you go, this is a very funny physics simulation game inside of a game that has like a plot and story and voice acting, and the jokes are good, and the presentation, the music, and the graphics are exactly where they need to be. The music, I think, goes above and beyond because of a couple of tracks really singing. And otherwise, I don't know. I think if you're interested in the genre but have never like tried it, this is an amazing starting point because, like you said, it is tuned to not be QWOP hard or like getting over it hard, which is fucking impossible. Which somebody just cracked a 1 minute, I think, on the on the world record for that game as well. So that's impressive. So this is definitely a great entry point, I think, into this sort of a genre, and it's just a fun game to play with friends. Because it is just fun to watch people fail at stuff that is designed to make you fail.
This is a good hanging out game.
Definitely a good hanging out game. I'll make a new playlist on YouTube for hanging out games and put this one on it. So yeah, I like this game a good bit, and would recommend. Hell yeah. Octodad, Dadliest Catch, catch it. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we are leaving Mystery May. Sadly, everyone salute, have a moment of silence, pour one out, etc. Press F. We are the video game podcast that forgot about that joke somehow. For Mystery May. And we're going to be talking about a game called The Bunker. Basically for two reasons. One, it's short, we've already played it, and we need as much time as we can for the upcoming month of games. And two, to expose our horrible, dirty little secret that we just play a bunch of FMV games in our free time. Because they're amusing and sometimes are done well.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a chasing the dragon thing.
Yeah.
Like what if this one's great?
Because there's always a chance, you know? What if this is the next Her story?
Yeah.
It won't be. Almost assuredly.
Mm-hmm. Or what if it's the next Harvester?
Or what if it's... Yeah, there's a lot of FMV that could go right in a genre that very often goes wrong. So, join us for that. And fucking until that time... Just gonna put a fucking in there. You can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There you can find our email address, our Twitter account, a link to the Discord server where you can suggest games for us to play or talk about the games that we have played, or anything else. You know, we're up for it. You can find a link to our YouTube channel, and you can listen to all of our old episodes, including episodes that we did on we did Jazz Punk recently, which is a comedy game, Shadows Over Loathing.
Yeah.
We did an episode about Taco Bell.
We also did West of Loathing.
Yeah, West of Loathing. We talked about... Do we do any like ocean games? We gotta get on that if we haven't.
I mean, we have Subnautica on the list.
That's true. Tune in at some point for Subnautica or like maybe Abzu or some shit. We'll figure it out. Super Mario Sunshine. Goodbye. Like, subscribe. Like, subscribe.
Smash the like button.
Ring that bell. Alright, I guess I'll test that.
All right.
Okay.
This is a sound test. This concludes the sound test.